Anybody? Classification? Yep. Learned a lot about what species are there. I mentioned that we have 1,750 species. So by actually collecting those species, you can learn what different species are in the park. It takes kind of a unique person to really enjoy looking through things like that, which is an herbarium sheet. But there is a vast group of people that enjoy that type of thing, and I know a lot of you are in the room. We actually have a herbarium in Grand Canyon. How many of you have been there? So there's about 8 or 9. That's a great opportunity, and it's located in the museum collection. It's on the South Rim, and if you haven't been there, you can make an appointment with Colleen Hyatt, who's wonderful, and you can go in. You can not only look at the museum collection, which is a great treasure, but you can also go in and look at the park's herbarium. Now, a lot of people don't have the time, or maybe don't necessarily. Catherine, did you have a question?
What are the pink feet with the red toenails?
Oh, I know. So, it's one of the treasures of the museum collection. It says, I hiked my feet off at Grand Canyon, and it was something that was sent to the museum collection from a collector.
It's not an odd plant.
It's not an odd plant, no. But it followed Rose Column nicely, so I put it in there, because she did walk her feet off. If you don't get the opportunity to go to the South Rim, and if you're interested to know what are those 1,750 species, there's 2 different ways you can find that out. One is that you can go online. We've put all of our herbarium collection online along with other herbaria in Arizona, and that's the address for it. You can also go to the park's website, and I've posted the most recent, although we have a lot of revisions to do, species list for the park. You can get to that on the park's website. So if you're kind of wondering, gosh, I wonder if they've got hollyhocks in the park, you can look and see what we've got. So that is a good resource. We actually a couple of us went to the Arizona Botany meeting 2 weeks ago, and I saw a presentation from Sue Rutland. She works at Organ Pipe, and she's doing a virtual herbarium project, and it was really such a great idea. She's actually taking live plants and she's scanning the live material, and the sheet she produced, I couldn't actually get it onto a slide, but it's like the plant is 3D and it kind of comes to life. So I think we're going to try to start doing more with that. We can use the work that she's already done. I think she's already scanned about 200 species that will probably be in Grand Canyon. So that's another resource, and it's a little bit easier to identify than when you see this kind of dead, pressed specimen. But it's still, the Parks Herbarium, if you haven't been there, I encourage you to go. We recently, well, actually, I guess it was about 2 years ago, initiated a vegetation mapping project for Grand Canyon. It's part of a national effort to map the vegetation in all of the park units, and they're kind of done in kind of a stepwise fashion. We are the largest park that has been done to date. We're not done, but taken on to date. And we also were the most vociferous in the way we wanted it done. There were certain things that if we were going to expend that amount of money to actually complete this, we wanted to make sure that we got out of the project, in addition to just having a map of the vegetation communities. And so we negotiated quite a bit with the national folks that run that project just to make sure we're going to get a usable product, at the end of it. And we really had skilled botanists on the cruise, and we wanted to not cut corners. Initially, the early kind of inventory work, where are you going to go? You're going to go down the trails, you're going to go down the river, you're going to capture the roadsides, but there were kind of vast gaps in where folks went to actually look at vegetation and do collection, and we wanted to make sure that we filled in those gaps. And what that meant is a lot of logistics. Those areas, particularly kind of in the western part of the park that were left out of the previous mapping effort, required helicopters to actually get into them, river access, a lot of extreme hiking, flash flood, taking you from your camp conditions. And I want to just acknowledge the field crews that worked on that. Is there anyone in here that worked on that project? Glenn? Thank you. And Mike Pearsley headed that project up, and he's still working on it. We actually anticipate completion I'm going to think our initial date was 2012. So in addition to learning a lot more about the vegetation, we'll have a new map. And so that means we'll have new kind of classified areas so that we know what's growing there. And there are a lot of uses for that. One of the things that I'm tasked to do is come up with what the desired future condition for the park-wide vegetation units are. And it's really hard to say what you want it to look like unless you know what it currently looks like. So this gives us a great opportunity to have a new data set so that we can start kind of making some of those management decisions. And also, before we take any sort of management action, we'll be able to truly know what's in that area. So is anybody familiar with the next kind of large-scale planning effort at Grand Canyon? The last one that I have in mind is the Colorado River Management Plan. Yeah, so the Backcountry Management Plan. So this new map could actually play a large role in giving us good data from which to base some of those just analyses. In addition to giving us a vegetation map, one of the things we fought really hard for, I mentioned, is having good botanists in the field. They collected 1,433 specimens. So what you learned from specimens was on a previous slide. You can learn a lot about just taxonomic type mysteries. You can really kind of determine when you're seeing speciation. Some of those things like corridors and barriers and isolation and elevation, it leads to the development of new species. And we're seeing that in Grand Canyon. So that collection of 1,433 herbarium sheets, those guys hauled them around in presses and did a tremendous job with that collection. And during that effort, we actually got 41 new plant species for Grand Canyon. And that's more than we've gotten, well, between that and other efforts that I'll mention, that is a huge addition to the flora. They also installed 1,502 plots. And from those plots, we'll actually have species-specific information. So again, if somebody wants to know if there's one of the invasive plant species in one of the areas in the park, from those plot data, we'll actually be able to have that type of information. So we're getting a lot more than just a vegetation map. And I definitely want to acknowledge Mike Pearsley, because that has been a very challenging project to implement, to say the least. Another thing that I had on the components of the vegetation program is just human impacts mitigation. And I'm going to talk about two different portions of that. I'm going to start with the backcountry portion. And how many of you are actually familiar with the Colorado River Management Plan? So it was raise your hands again. Okay, it was a large-scale effort that was completed recently. It is considered an adaptive management plan. And so the idea with adaptive management is you start implementing it, and then you really analyze, are you achieving the goals that you wanted to through implementation of the plan? And so we've seen different use levels. We've seen river use spread out a little bit into different seasons. And we've seen kind of a change in launches and user groups. So as an adaptive management plan, you need to kind of know what's going on with it. And there's a couple components that we're involved with. One of them is just the monitoring. And so we've got a program where we monitor the impacts from humans in these campsite areas. And we look at old high water zone and new high water zone, which I'm not really going to get into, but the bottom line is we're monitoring so that we can see a couple years down the line if those changes that we made in the management is achieving the effect that we wanted. Are we protecting these resources? Are we increasing the health of these resources? The other thing that we're doing is paying attention to the actual condition of the resources. So how many of you have been in a campsite along the river at Grand Canyon? So quite a few of you. So you know there's a limited number of campsites, and they're spread throughout the canyon, kind of dominant, and there are stretches where there aren't quite as many. We try to keep the use down, camping, walking, cooking, whatever kind of camping activities you